Okay, well, so we're live, just making sure. Okay. Well,
Yep, you're all set.
Okay, thanks so much. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another in our series of Center for Elder Law and Justice Facebook Live events and presentations. My name is Alex Fehrman. I'm a staff attorney here at Center for Elder Law and Justice, working in our immigration and naturalization unit. I'm joined today by one of our esteemed and wonderful colleagues, Fidele. Fidele, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. I'm Fidele Menavanza. I have been at the CELJ for 6 years now, and do work under the supervision of Attorney Alex in the immigration unit.
And I've been here at CELJ for about 3 years now, so got up to speed on the immigration stuff and really looking forward to sharing with everybody today just a pathway to citizenship, how that looks for your typical person, what are some things that you would want to look at and be aware of, and some mistakes that you can avoid as you go through this process. Just would ask that all questions, if you have any, please feel free to type them in the comments. We will be dealing with those at the end of the presentation. So, but please feel free to type those in just because I can't see them with the way my screen's set up until the end. So, disclaimer, of course, first, that this presentation is for informational purposes only. It should not be considered or interpreted as legal advice. This is just to give you who are watching an idea of what this process is like, and the information that we share might not be applicable to your specific situation. So if you do have a specific question regarding your individual circumstances, you should absolutely consult an attorney for further advice on that. And at the end of the presentation, we'll let you know how you can contact Center for Elder Law and Justice if you qualify for that. So I think that takes care of all the housekeeping matters, but let's take that away. So the first thing that people need to understand is that when you're dealing with citizenship, when you're dealing with naturalization, which is the fancy word for it, you're dealing with the United States federal government. And in dealing with the United States federal government, you are going to be running into a lot of abbreviations and a lot of forms. So we're going to go through a lot of those. So if you have any questions on what is the abbreviation we're using, it's going to be this whole presentation will be published on CELJ's YouTube channel as well as saved to our Facebook page. So feel free to go back and watch again so that you can, if you have any questions on just what is the abbreviation that we're using. But the main department that you're going to work with is United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS. They are the department that is responsible for overseeing the citizenship and permanent residency applications of individuals seeking to either apply for citizenship or adjust their status from a temporary visa, for example, to a lawful or long-time permanent resident. You're going to go through this department. USCIS is actually a subdivision of the United States Department of Homeland Security, or DHS for short. They have multiple field offices across the country. There is one in Buffalo. It's on Delaware Avenue. That's if you're located in Erie County or really all of Western New York, that's the office that you're going to be going to if you actually need to go physically there. For a lot of people, for most of the time that you're dealing with USCIS, your interaction with them is going to be coming through filling out different forms and then submitting them and then waiting for them to give you further instructions. So sometimes you will fill out a form and you'll be waiting. Fidele, I know sometimes we wait a few months for things to be scheduled after that. So it can be a decent wait. So a lot of times you are filling out those forms and waiting for them. They'll send you letters saying we've received it. They might send you some next steps. They might schedule an interview depending on what you apply for. And we'll go through that as we go through the presentation. But there is a form for everything. and regardless of what you want to do or not. And all of these forms, USCIS does have a website that is actually pretty helpful in terms of navigating where you find all of this information, but we'll go over the most common forms in this presentation, what they look like, as well as some basics for filling them out. Can't stress this enough, of course, being an attorney, I'm going to say this, but working with an attorney or law office, very helpful through this process. It's one of the things that we do is we can help cut down on some of that uncertainty and bureaucracy because we know how the system works. We know generally what's going to happen next, how long that takes to happen, what delays might be involved, especially during COVID right now. And one of the things that I think we can really pride ourselves on is really providing that assurance to our clients and people who we help, and that just understanding that we know the process, and any attorney, good attorney that you work with will know the process and will know how to deal with USCIS well to help you out. One other tiny disclaimer coming up is, I'm not sure if anyone heard, but there was an election a few weeks ago. No, it wasn't in the news at all. It was very, very low key. But there is going to be a new administration coming in. So some of these practices may change. So always follow up with an attorney if you have any questions on that. But as of the date of this presentation, which is November 23rd, 2020, this is the up-to-date information on how USCIS is processing these applications. If you have any questions, say you're watching in the future, please absolutely contact an attorney to talk about your specific situation. Okay, Fidel, do you want to take step one, entering the United States?
Yes, thank you so much. Just to piggyback on the first slide, yes, there are forms to be filled out, and the website lets anyone who wants to do it by himself to do that. But it's important to have an attorney, because many times people will start the process or will start filling out the form, and they mess up things, then they will find out later that they need an attorney. We do advise clients or whoever who's in need of immigration benefit to seek assistance with us or with other legal services providers.
Thank you so much. That is a really good reminder. Thank you.
So the first step is when you get into the US, first you should seek a visa from overseas. We do know that there are plenty of ways to enter the US, but the main or the major way to do that is to seek visa where you live. For those who are not refugees, I believe we will get there soon. But again, it is not the focus on explaining how many visa we need or what are the type of visa. But anyone who's a refugee or a grant asylum or a lawful visa statute holder can enter the US. And we have plenty of places, meaning the borders, whether through the airport or through the terrorist entering places where people can interact with an officer who will check their statute once they are in. If they did comply with the requirement, then they are allowed to get into the US. There are other people who may sneak around, and those are those we know are called generally undocumented. But we are, for the purpose of this presentation, we are focusing mainly on those who enter the US legally or through the official point of entries, which are either the airports or the border. Once they get into, then there is a file. Actually, A stands for alien. A file, that's a name we do use generally, because when you are inspected by a US officer, they will open up a file and give you or provide you with a number, and that number it's important because that will be used in different platform or ways in dealing with immigration. And that A number actually includes all your background information since you did apply for visa overseas and up to the time you become a U.S. citizen.
Thank you so much, Fidel. That fantastic. It's if you are have a question about if you did not come through one of the designated ports, there are some organizations in Buffalo that can potentially assist you. We will give that information at the end of the presentation. Unfortunately, that's not something that Center for Elder Law and Justice is able to do, but there are some organizations in Buffalo that may be able to help. So it's not the focus of this presentation, but it's good to get that information out, I think. So next step after you have entered the United States is to become a lawful permanent resident, or an LPR. And those are people who are not citizens yet, but they have been authorized by the United States government to live in the U.S. As long as they want. You might have heard someone say, I'm getting my green card. This is that. There is that's the colloquialism. If someone says, I need a green card application, they're asking for an application to become a lawful permanent resident. It's just a more formal way of saying green card holder. There is a form in the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services website called the I-485 form. These forms do roll off the tongue, and they are have very, very fun and interesting names. But just to, not going to open that up right now, just for the sake of the tech and making sure that I don't accidentally crash this presentation. You can find all of these on the USCIS website. If you Google USCIS form I-485, it's going to be the first thing that comes up. There are different ways of applying for LPR status, and that will depend on your specific criteria for coming into the United States. If you came in as a refugee or an asylee, you're going to apply in a slightly different manner than if you had come in on a work visa or a family unification visa. It's going to be a slightly different part of the form that you'll fill out, and there might be some additional criteria and documentation that you'll need to submit. But that is really going to be based off of your specific circumstance. In a general sense, you cannot become a citizen until you have been an LPR for at least 5 years residing in the United States. That's why this step is so important to the process. It also means that you have been granted the ability to stay in the United States indefinitely, which is huge, especially if there were initially timeframes to reapply for visas, for example. This is a way of dealing with that on a more permanent basis. Anything you'd like to add, Fidel?
Yeah, just to add that the form I-485, it's contains more than 20 pages. So each of those questions should be answered correctly, because if by mistake you did not or you don't provide the correct information, or you didn't post the proper box, then the USCIS can either reject your file or application, or can delay the adjudication of your application. So it takes caution to follow and try to answer all those questions in that form. Yeah, that's all I can add. Beside the fact that depend on under which category you live in US, there are slight differences, as Alex, you have already clearly mentioned that.
Okay. And then an attorney would sit down with you and talk about your specific circumstance and make sure that all of the questions are answered, as well as that they're answered consistently and correctly, so that you don't run into those delays. Okay, basic requirements for citizenship. These are things that you have to meet before you can apply for citizenship or naturalization. So you have to have continuous permanent residence in the United States for a minimum of 5 years. Now that is 5 years or 3 years in some cases involving if you're married to a U.S. citizen. That's 5 years from when you became a lawful permanent resident. A lot of times you will have lived in the United States for some time before you become a lawful permanent resident. Unfortunately, when it comes to citizenship, those years don't count towards your 5 years. So it's become a lawful permanent resident, wait 5 years from that, and then you can apply. Or in 3 years, depending on if you have been married to a United States citizen. But that's a case that we tend to not see as often, but it can certainly come up. Of course, you need your LPR status when you apply. The 5-year period, I did say continuous permanent residence. That doesn't mean that you can't leave the United States to go back to your home country. Say you have relatives or friends, or something happens where you want to go and spend a holiday with them, for example, or visit them. You can absolutely do that. It is that requirement essentially says that, I mean, there are a couple ways that you can break that. One is by spending more than a year cumulative in your previous 5 years outside of the United States. Another way is potentially, and it's on a slightly case-by-case basis, but it is common enough that if you'd spend 6 months continuously outside of the United States. Right now with COVID, it's still not entirely hammered out how they're dealing with that, because a lot of people were stuck outside of the United States in March and weren't able to get back. Depending on where you went and what COVID restrictions were in place, that could have really impacted you. It's not entirely clear at this point how that's being played out, but I expect that's going to change over the next year, 6 months to a year, as we start seeing some more of those cases come through. Proof of physical residence in the United States for 30 months prior to your application, or 18 months in cases involving marriage to a United States citizen. Again, that is more so, where is your house? Do you maintain a house or a household in the United States? That's what they're looking for. And then proof of residence for at least 3 months in the state or the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services Office district where you're claiming residence. So that you resided, say, in Western New York for the past 3 months at the time of your application. The period of 5 years, you can apply 90 days before you hit that day. It might delay, you might not get an interview until you hit that time frame, but you can apply 90 days or sooner before you hit your 5-year anniversary of being an LPR. And that's beneficial if you want to get started on the process, or if you are sort of anticipating, especially now with COVID, that there were some hiccups or some delays with that. That's been helpful for a bunch of people. Anything, I think that's it on this. But I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything.
Not too much, just to say that you may be a green card holder and still able to travel, as you say. And for some cases, if it's clear that you may spend more than a year overseas, then you should file another form. That's not the case here, but there is some form or another form to file prior to traveling more than a year, if that's the case. So that when you come back, you may be directly let be in by the U.S. officer at the point of entry or the border. But missing to fill out that form prior to leaving can make you ineligible entering back to the US.
One other thing that I forgot to mention is that if you come into the United States as a refugee and then you return to the country that you claimed refugee status from, definitely consult an attorney before you do that. That's going to be a pretty big issue, but definitely something that you would want to talk to an attorney about, because that could impact not just citizenship, it could impact your ability to return to the United States. Consult an attorney, but just so people are aware that that is one of the bigger red flags that they look for. If it's someone who is a refugee, goes back to the country that they claimed refugee status from. Basic requirements for citizenship. This is actually getting into how you go through the process and the interview when you are applying for citizenship, because there is an interview process. What is a basic ability to read, write basic English, and speak and understand spoken English, including a demonstration of a basic understanding of United States history and government works or civics. And the test for this is administered in English at your interview. We'll get to the interview in just a moment, but that is when that happens. It's not something that you prepare or do when you apply. It is something that happens when USCIS schedules your interview about 3 or 4 months after you apply for citizenship. Meaning, once you apply, you have that time if you need to study English or United States history. You have an idea of how much time you have to do that. There is a way that you can waive the requirement to learn English or be able to demonstrate spoken, written, and verbal English, spoken and verbal, I would say, but English reading. And that is an eligibility determined for an age-related or disability-related exceptions for that English and civics test. And that is for people who are disabled and their disability prevents them from learning a new language like English, or learning or retaining knowledge of United States history or civics. You also might be able to get that requirement waived if you are a senior citizen who has been in the United States for 20 years at the time of your application. That is very, very rare. Because a lot of times if you've been in the United States for 20 years, you've gone through the citizenship process already, but it has happened and it does happen. And that's one way you can waive it. Other things that you would want to have ready and prepared, documents related to any arrest records in the United States, travel outside of the United States after your initial arrival here, any marriage, divorce, or annulment documents, or if unfortunately your spouse has passed away, death certificate, or a change of name if that's applicable to your circumstance. A lot of these are case-by-case basis. Don't think that if you were arrested in the United States that's an automatic bar to citizenship. It may not be. It would really depend on your specific circumstance. So definitely consult with an attorney and bring that up in your initial meeting, because a lot of times if you bring that up, that's something that can at least be dealt with. But that's not something you want to get to the interview and find out then and there, because they will find out. USCIS, like any government agency, they're good at finding out this sort of information. So best to be open and upfront, have all that documentation ready before you apply.
One thing just to add, the USCIS provides any applicant with a booklet when you get there for your biometrics or fingerprints. So they will provide you with a booklet containing at least 100 questions where people can practice to learn and study the question. Mm-hmm. Now, that was prior to the pandemic. I'm not quite sure if Alex, you can say for sure they are still doing it, but in the past it was the case. Whoever who want to apply will apply, and then prior to get to the date of your interview, they will provide you with a copy or a
is still available online if you're unable to get a paper copy. And a lot of agencies or just that cater to the immigrant community in Buffalo, most of them have ways of getting a paper copy printed for you if you absolutely need it. So don't be afraid to ask. Rather that you have it and need to study up than not have that resource to be able to go into your interview with. Kind of going off of that language and civics waiver that we talked about. N648, this is what to do if you cannot learn English. Most importantly, this is one of the trickiest forms for USCIS when you're dealing with them. It is one that will possibly give you a little bit of a headache, but hoping to part some of the veil on that to give everyone an understanding of what this form does and some pitfalls you can avoid. So when do you want to submit an N648 form? And this is if you are seeking to apply for citizenship and you have a medical condition or a disability that prevents you from learning English and or United States history and civics. You can split the two. You can have it apply, okay, I can learn US history and civics, but I can't learn English for whatever reason. You can just ask for one or all of those to be waived. This form is not something that will be accepted if your medical condition is, you have, for example, if your only medical condition is that you are blind, USCIS will see that and they'll say, well, you could learn English. You might not be able to learn or demonstrate written English, but you should be able to learn spoken English verbally with someone teaching you and going through how to speak English. Whether or not that's correct, I think that's up for debate, but that's how USCIS does see that. This form must be completed by either an MD or a DO, a doctor of osteopathic medicine. Cannot be completed by a nurse practitioner or a registered nurse if that's who you normally see. Sometimes some of the clinics around here, the person you see most often is a nurse practitioner or a registered nurse or someone if you see where you don't typically need like in-depth specialized care. They can certainly provide great health care. They can't complete this form. This form is also available online. It must be completed by the physician, by the doctor, within 6 months of you applying for citizenship with that N400 application for citizenship. Otherwise, it will be rejected as untimely. USCIS does have specific, very, very specific requirements for the languages doctors use when completing this form, or else they will not accept it. And you'll have to try to go through the English and civics tests at your interview. Fortunately, we do at Center for Elder Law and Justice have a best practices guide for physicians who are completing this form. Basically, when we send this off to your doctor or someone's doctor, we say to the doctor, listen, you know much more about the medical side of this than we do, certainly than I do, and you don't want me diagnosing you with anything, because I have no idea what I'm talking about when it comes to medical conditions. However, we want to make sure that when you as the doctor submit this form and complete it, that it's done to USCIS's now more rigorous standards, so that you only have to do it once, so that the patient or client gets it accepted, can get their citizenship interview done with an interpreter, and then we can get them on their way. Unfortunately, sometimes the language that USCIS requires doesn't make a lot of sense, but it is based off of what we've seen them accept and reject. So if you are working with a physician, we'll absolutely send that to them so that they have an idea how to fill this form out. Not necessarily correctly is not a word I would use, but to USCIS's standards. because it might have all the information, but if you don't have the wording that USCIS wants, they're not going to accept it, unfortunately. It's kind of why if you have a question or your physician has a question, something definitely to consult with an attorney about, just to make sure that the language is done well the first time so that you don't have to do it again. When you submit the N648, you will not find out if it has been accepted until your interview. So unfortunately, that means that if it's not accepted, you can either come back and try again. If it's your first interview, you can submit a new N648. You can submit 2 each time you apply for citizenship, or you can try to take the English and civics tests. Sometimes people get N648s rejected and they're able to pass the English and civics test their first time try. Pretty rare, but it does happen. It's certainly not a common occurrence, but if you feel comfortable trying, I'd suggest give it a try. Worst case is we can submit the new N648 and come back in your second interview. If it is accepted, you can use an interpreter in your interview, and we are at this point scheduling the interpreters to be there for N648 clients, but that's something that you will want to schedule in advance. And what they'll do is they'll go through the rest of your application with you. You won't have to do the English or the United States history or civics tests, and they'll go through your application with you using the interpreter. I'm spending a lot of time on this form because it is so tricky to get done to USCIS's standards, and because it is so important for a lot of elderly individuals who might be suffering from a medical condition that would prevent them from learning English. If you have a question on this form or whether you qualify or what your status is on that, or please either consult with an attorney on that, because this is something where the doctor, of course, has all the medical knowledge. Unfortunately, they need to have the medical knowledge as well as a knowledge of how USCIS looks at these forms. So we try to have a collaborative effort with the physicians in the area doing these so that we can get them done and accepted the first time around. Saves the doctor time, it's better for the person who's applying for citizenship, and it makes the process a lot smoother. But I think that's it on the N648 basics from me. Anything, Fidel?
Not fun. Just to say that the agency, the CLJ, can provide with some training for some physician or medical facility that are in need of understanding or mastering this form, because we have been seeing many forms being rejected, even if they were signed by a medical doctor. So, and we are at least with the resources to assist doctor and providing them with the correct information or the training so that this form can be hopefully accepted or approved by the USCIS.
That form did change pretty significantly just recently. So we did update our best practices for physicians to accommodate that form change. So if you were used to filling out the old version of the form, it has changed. They're asking for a little bit more information, but if you have any questions, please, we can absolutely provide and have provided training to physicians and doctors across Western New York on how to complete this to USCIS's standards. And certainly something that if it's, we're willing to do again if there's an interest. Okay. We're just getting to the application process, so it is a long process to apply for citizenship. And I keep using that word naturalization. That's the formal term for you were not born in the United States and granted citizenship that way, but you came here from a different country and you want to become a citizen. That's the term that our office uses, and that's the term that USCIS uses, is naturalization. The application for that is the Form N100. That is a 20-page long application. It's a very scary form when you first look at it, but if you go through it with someone, it's actually not that bad. There are some sensitive or a lot of sensitive questions in that form, though, and honesty and accuracy is so important because USCIS will check your N400 to your lawful permanent residence application and what you said on that, and they'll check to what you said when you first came into the United States. So if there's, something has changed in between or they don't match up, there's going to be some questions that they're going to ask about that. So it is very, very important to be honest and accurate throughout this entire form. Some of the sensitive questions have to do with, one that we're pretty confident is going to be phased out within the next couple of years is, for example, were you a member of the Nazi Party in the late 1930s up through 1945? And the reason that we think that's going to be phased out, of course, is because most people applying were born after 1945. But that's one of the questions, just to give you an idea of some of the things that this form will ask. Sometimes it's a little silly when you're going through this based on your personal life history, but you still have to answer all of the questions. So I use the Nazi Party question as a big one because I don't think we've had a client yet who's been more than 2 or 3 years old when 1945 rolled around. So I use that as a silly example, but you still have to answer that question. Once you submit the form with all of your supporting documents, USCIS will schedule an interview that typically is about 3 to 4 months after they receive the application. Of course, with the office located in Buffalo, it's now located in an orange COVID zone as of the time of this presentation. They are still operating. They are still scheduling interviews. They do take COVID precautions in terms of complying with mask regulations, as well as making sure that, if you are experiencing any COVID-related symptoms, that there are, you can call them, they will reschedule your interview. If you are experiencing some symptoms, I encourage you to do that. They are complying with social distancing as well for those of you who might be concerned about that. But don't be surprised that if Erie County or the city of Buffalo goes into the red zone for COVID restrictions in the next couple of months, that may delay when your interview gets scheduled. We did see a lot of delays on these interviews from the spring up until now. We are seeing we were seeing cases where we submitted the application, I believe, early March, just before the lockdown hit. They, because of COVID, did not get an interview until late August, early September, if I remember right, Fidele. So it was taking a while. So don't be surprised if that happens. That's not, a bad sign. It's not a good sign. It's just COVID is impacting this process and slowing it down. So don't be worried if that takes a little longer, especially if the COVID restrictions go to the next level in the city of Buffalo and Erie County. But if you are concerned, if you do have some COVID-related concerns, that is absolutely something that you can call an attorney's office about. Many, if not all, of the legal services providers will have information if they work with citizenship or immigrant communities on how that is impacting how USCIS is dealing with these applications.
Well, yeah, we do advise the client to be patient because on the top of the pandemic, the USCIS has experienced some backlog for a while. So once you apply, we can assist for sure, but we cannot control. We don't have any control over the USCIS processing time. It may be over 4, 6, 7 months. But for us, once we do apply, we submit your application. Once we get the receipt notice, we are 100% sure that the USCIS is processing your application. Just to come back to the naturalization process, we should stress this that it's optional. You are not required to become a US citizen because having a green card lets you live here at least for 10 years. The green card's timeline is for 10 years that you can renew as long as you are fulfilling the requirements we did say previously. So you still have the right to live here under your green card statute at least for 10 years and renew it once it's time. That's another way. At least we do advise and we encourage people to naturalize because you have some benefits of becoming a US citizen, then just keep holding with your green card statute. So to prevent from mismatch information, what we generally do is to submit a FOIA request to get your old application and to make sure we do provide the USCIS with the correct information. We have been seeing some cases where people in good faith will provide us with information with their background or with the answer, but after we got the FOIA file, we found out that there were some mismatch or some mistake they have made. And to prevent those kind of issues, we do take our time prior to submitting the application. So that's why we generally ask our client to be patient and to have faith. Those are the two words we use, faith and patience, because we prefer to send or to submit the application appropriately so that they are not rejected or delayed by the USCIS.
Excellent point, Fidele. Thank you so much. Yeah, we're not here to, judge anything for people who might want to do this or might not want citizenship, but just to advise, and that's why we take a look and make sure all the information is correct and accurate. So thank you so much for that comment, Fidele. The fee waiver application. This is the show me the money portion of the presentation. Now, for Center for Elder Law and Justice, there is, of course, no charge for our services. We do get funding to assist people with these. So this is not for your attorney's fees if you're using Center for Elder Law and Justice. If you are using a private attorney, that's something that they would set. You are specifically talking about fees that USCIS requires. So don't be confused. This isn't attorney's fees. This is fees just to submit the application paid to USCIS or Department of Homeland Security. And the fee right now to apply for naturalization is $725, which is a lot. And a lot of people can't afford that. You can request that that fee be waived. And just like everything else we've been talking about, there's a specific form for that. It is the I-912 form. And you can request through that form that the fee be waived for 3 specific reasons. One is you're receiving a means-tested benefit, such as Medicaid, for example, or if you're receiving like supplemental nutritional assistance programs or SNAP or food stamps, that is a way that you can apply for assistance or for the fee waiver. If your income is below 150% of the federal poverty guidelines, or if you're experiencing a financial hardship. And I've listed these in sort of the ease of getting USCIS to accept and waive the fee. So there are supporting documents that you need to establish a lot of these. For example, you will need more documentation to show that you're below 150% of the federal poverty guidelines than you might for your means-tested benefit. Sometimes they'll ask for the award letter from, say, Social Security if you're receiving Social Security income, or the award of supplemental nutritional assistance. Financial hardship is a little more difficult to get USCIS to accept than the means-tested benefit or below 150% federal poverty, only because it's a little more difficult to prove that your financial hardship is long-term enough and profound enough to prevent you from paying the fee. Happens, it's just not as common as the other two. But that is something that if you sit down with an attorney and say, I'm having issues, I can't really pay this fee, something that they can look at and make sure that, see if there's options for the fee waiver. Now, there were talks, there was a rule implemented back in the fall that was going to change how fee waivers worked. And essentially what that rule was going to do was going to increase the fee associated with this application, and they were going to stop accepting fee waiver applications for naturalization. That was the subject of a lawsuit out in California, and the judge, the federal court judge in that lawsuit, did issue an injunction suspending that rule change. That was done back in October, late September, early October actually. But that was extended until February 15th, 2021. So February 15th of next year, that's when that rule may go into effect. At this time, we're not sure with 100% certainty what the new administration is going to do with this. So as that approaches, we keep updated. We'll probably put it on our Center for Elder Law and Justice blog as that changes. So check our blog, check our website. If you have any questions about that, either you can call, you can go on USCIS's website as well. They have that information there too. But just something to keep a lookout for as we get closer to that February date. Okay. So after you've done all the applications, after you've done all of the forms and all of the paperwork, USCIS will send you a letter with your interview date and time. So be sure that you've got a good mailing address on file with them and that you're keeping an eye on your mail. Very crucial that you do that. You don't want to miss your interview. We do keep track, and we request that USCIS sends all things to our office too. That's one of the services that we provide, but also check your mail. Keep on that. Each applicant will get 2 chances to complete their interview. So if you don't get everything correct the first time, in terms of your English or your civics test, you can try again. The interview is cumulative. So if you say pass the civics test, your first interview, but you fail your English test, second interview, you don't need to take your civics test again. You just need to do your English test. The English test portion has 4 parts. There is the listening part, in which you are given a sentence to, listening and writing kind of go hand in hand here. You're given a sentence spoken to you that you have to write down. Reading and speaking also kind of go hand in hand. You're given a sentence to read out loud. And then there's the listening and speaking portion, which is the larger portion of the interview. And that is your whole interview, is that portion of the test. So you're going to do your entire interview unless you got your language waiver approved in English. The entire interview is that spoken English test. And if you have an attorney or someone in there with you, say you have either you have an attorney or say you've got a disability and you have someone come in to accommodate and help you with that disability. Say there's mobility issues and someone helps you with that or what have you. They cannot assist you with the English portion of the test. So if you're struggling with an English word and say, your family member who is helping you with your disability says it in your native language, that could be enough to fail you. Or if your attorney says, here's what this word means, and just jumps in and says to help you with that English portion, that is going to be an automatic failure. You're going to have to come back and try again. So just something to be aware of there. Your civics and your history test right now and for applications that are being received up until December 1st, is going to use a slightly different version of the test. That did just change for applications submitted after December 1st of this year. The old form and what is being used right now is 10 questions on US history and civics. You need to get 10 or 6 correct. The new version of that test, which is going to be rolled out, it's doubling everything. So 20 questions, you need to get 12 correct. If you want an idea of what those questions are, as Fidele stated, they have in the past given you a booklet to study that has some practice questions in there. You can also go on USCIS's website, and there are some practice questions that if you want to try it there, you can. But one of the things you just got to study and you just need to be prepared for. Once you've done all of those testing portions, the USCIS officer who is interviewing you will review your application with you. So your N400 has a lot of yes/no questions. They'll go through not necessarily all of those, but a decent chunk of those with you, as well as if there's any other questions that they might have. And those answers need to be consistent. Again, consistency is a big thing. So if you had said, for example, one of the questions on the N400 is, were you ever involved with a military organization? So check no when you submit your form. Then you say yes at your interview. That's going to be, they're going to go into more detail on that with you. So be careful there. Definitely practice your application, review it thoroughly, practice your spoken English. And if you have any questions or concerns about that, there are a lot of resources that you can, if you want to go on to Center for Elder Law and Justice's website or our blog, keep updated with those. We try to keep those resources up to date as they become more available, especially during COVID. A lot are virtual, but if you have any questions, speak to your attorney on that, or talk to, if there's another agency helping you with your application, talk to them as well.
Just to add that within the community, we have different schools. The Buffalo Public Schools assist people who want to learn about the citizenship question. So we have, let's say, at International Institute, Jericho Road, Hope Refugee, or different places. That was before the pandemic. I'm not quite sure if they are still assisting people who want to learn in person, but in the past, that was the case where people may go and get free training how to pass the civics and history naturalization.
Yeah, absolutely. So just follow up, and if you have any questions, always ask. So recent updates to the test, which we kind of touched on. So the date relevant to the new civics test and history test is your filing date, so your receipt date, the date that USCIS gets your application. After December 1st, if they get it, which, that's going to be most people after this presentation because that's a week from tomorrow. We need to take the new version, the 2020 version, which is just more questions that you have to answer than the 2008 version. So like I said before, the new version, 20 questions, you need to get 12 right. The old version, if you had already gotten your application submitted, 10 questions, you need to get 6 correct. The English portion of the test has not changed. So regardless of which portion of the civics test you're taking, same English test in terms of your reading and writing ability. And then the poor outcome, or the outcome you don't want, is if you fail one of these tests. If it's your first interview, you get another chance. You get to come back for a second interview. They'll schedule it. They'll schedule one for you. And if it is your second interview, you are going to need to start over and complete another application and try again. As I said before, any help with the English portion, that's spoken and spoken English as well as English listening skills, any help with that will result in failure for that portion. You're going to need to come back and try again. But don't despair. This is not the end. Most people just need to practice their English and try again. And if that's the case, what we encourage people to do, try again, brush up on your English skills. You should be a lot more prepared next time, especially now that you understand what the process is going to look like, having lived through it and having gone through the interview. And if naturalization application is approved, which is the outcome we certainly prefer, before COVID hit, you exit the interview, your application has been approved. At that time, you're still not yet a citizen. There's a ceremony that takes place. It was at one of the downtown courthouses where you would get a bunch of people who had their applications approved within the past 2 or 3 weeks or so, would all get together. They would all take the oath of allegiance to the United States together, get their certificates at that point. Because of COVID right now, courts are still closed for that type of gathering. So what USCIS is doing is they're having people take their oath of allegiance to the United States the day of their interview, if their application is approved. Practically, that looks like you go through your interview, say everything goes well, you get your applications approved, you're going to be naturalized. They basically take you back to the waiting room, sit there for 20, 30 minutes or so while they print out your application. They call you back, you say the oath of allegiance to the United States, and then you get your certificate. You do give the USCIS officer, regardless of if you're going to a ceremony or you're doing it at their office, you do give up your green card because you have a certificate of naturalization, which is a stronger document. It's if you're a citizen, you're no longer a lawful permanent resident, you don't need the green card anymore. This will certainly change as we get beyond COVID, whenever that might be. It will probably go back to the ceremony style, but that maybe not. It depends on what they feel is more efficient and more cost effective. So just keep up on that. But at least for right now, they're not doing the ceremonies. They're just doing your oath that day and you get your certificate if your application is approved. The only other thing with that is I think that's it on that. Fidel, did you have anything?
I think you already say don't have any comments on that.
Okay.
So once people application are approved, so they shown in as a U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
That's the end of the game.
Yeah. And how can CELJ help? This is the part where we do our self-promotion. So how can we help? So Center for Elder Law and Justice, we provide free legal services to low-income individuals who are seeking help with applying for a green card, applying for citizenship, applying for family unification, who are 60 years old and older, as well as refugees or immigrants who have an elderly family member in our household. So a lot of times we help the whole family if there's an elderly person in the household. Because we advise if one person's going to do it and everyone qualifies, it makes sense for everyone to apply for citizenship if they're able to. But if they don't want to, that's fine, of course. But please reach out to us if you have any questions or need some assistance. If we're not able to take your case for whatever reason, there are some other agencies we could absolutely refer you to. If you want to contact us, we're located at 438 Main Street, Suite 1200. So all the way on the top floor in Buffalo. We're right across from Lafayette Square, right across from the Liberty Building on Court Street. The telephone number is 716-853-3087. And if you need an interpreter, we can provide that service as well. We have language line as well as sometimes we use International Institute. We are getting some chats. Okay, looks like we haven't had any questions, but absolutely, if you do have some questions or concerns, please follow up with us on our blog. Center for Elder Law and Justice has a blog you can access on our website. And you can absolutely give us a call. We do ask during this time, because of COVID concerns, if you would like an appointment, please call ahead and schedule one so we can make sure that we stay safe and that we keep you safe as well. We don't want you coming in for an appointment in unsafe conditions, because we want all of the people who come into our office to be well taken care of, both legally, physically, and health-wise. So if you have any questions or concerns, please call us. If you'd like to schedule an appointment, we ask that you do please call ahead during this time. But absolutely follow up with our blog. And thank you. It's been an honor to present on this topic. Thank you, Fidele.
Thank you.
Honor to present with you as well.
Thank you so much.
Okay.